Not a loser, not weak, but a foreign version of oneself, adrift and worn thin. The one who once longed for change is now trapped in the weary cycle of delay, of distraction, of promises never kept. Yet the flame within has never died. It merely lacks oxygen, a chance, a jolt, to ignite. And this moment is that chance. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but now. Reset, restart, refocus. We don't need miracles. We need motion. Stoicism is not blind faith. It's the mastery of what lies within our grasp, our mind, our actions, our responses, and our discipline. This is not a fleeting motivational video. This is a wake-up call, a tolling bell to rise, to shatter the fragile shell, and be reborn from your own ruins. 1. Discipline over feelings. Action without inspiration. We often overestimate the role of motivation. In countless inspirational videos, people speak of an inner fire, of burning emotions that drive us to act. But the simple truth is, no one can remain consistent relying on motivation alone. Motivation is fleeting. It arrives unannounced and can vanish after a sleepless night, a harsh word, or a low-spirited day. No one, not even the most successful, can build lasting change on emotion alone. And this is where discipline steps in. Discipline doesn't wait for you to feel inspired. It doesn't depend on the weather, your mood, or praise from others. Discipline is the ability to act, regardless of internal conditions. When it's cold, you still get out of bed. When your mind feels lazy, you still complete the workout. When no one is watching or applauding, you still follow the habits you've set. Discipline is the dividing line between potential unrealized and the quiet, daily construction of self. Stoicism has long regarded discipline as a cornerstone of true freedom. To the Stoic, freedom isn't the ability to do whatever one wants, but the ability to refrain from what is harmful, even when one desires it. Freedom doesn't come from acting on emotion, but from mastering it in service of a higher aim. Discipline is the bridge between inner freedom and outer action. Without it, one is ruled by emotion and circumstance. With it, one masters the self. That is true power. A person might feel highly motivated in the morning, planning to hit the gym, eat clean, and learn something new. But by evening, under work pressure, or stung by an unexpected message, all those intentions dissolve. Without discipline, it's easy to rationalize delay. I'll do it tomorrow. But when tomorrow comes, the cycle repeats. Disappointment, guilt, and more postponement. Discipline is the silent declaration that action needs no emotional permission. It is a system of living where small habits are executed consistently, not from feeling, but from principle. When someone wakes up on time for 30 consecutive days, it's not because they felt like it 30 times, but because they understand that consistency is the seed of transformation. Just as you can't build a house only when you feel like it, every brick must be laid with steadiness and resolve. No exceptions. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca share a single message. You cannot control what happens out there, but you can control how you respond. And steady, calm, effective response is born only of a disciplined life. The undisciplined react with emotion, anger when insulted, laziness when tired, surrender when challenged. The disciplined respond with reason because they've trained themselves under discomfort. Another vital aspect of discipline is accumulation. Every disciplined act, however small, is a piece of a new self taking shape. One workout won't make you strong. One study session won't make you an expert, but repeated for 90, 180, 365 days. This is how you change without noticing. Like water carving stone, discipline silently shapes you more deeply than any burst of passion ever could. The truth is, discipline does not come from promises. It comes from systems. Disciplined people don't just resolve things each Monday. They build behavioral scaffolding, clear schedules, online limits, supportive environments, and like-minded friends. They don't ask themselves daily whether or not to act, because the decision was already made. In Stoicism, this is the image of an inner warrior, one who fights not by impulse, but by standard. And perhaps the greatest gift discipline offers is trust in oneself. When you keep even the smallest promise to yourself, you forge solid inner trust. You know, I will act, unseen, unmotivated, and under imperfect conditions. That trust cannot be taken. It is earned by real action, repeated across the seasons. And once you trust yourself, the world is no longer so daunting. Discipline need not be complex. It begins with doing what you said you would, even if it's small. Turning off your phone on time, getting up when the alarm rings, writing a few lines each day, skipping the food you said you'd avoid. These small acts, done long enough, form a person of strength, not from blazing inspiration, but from the steady flame of a trained will. In Stoic philosophy, discipline isn't just a tool for doing what's right. It is a sacred commitment, an unwritten promise between you and yourself. Discipline doesn't exist to please others, nor to be publicly praised. It is quiet but potent proof that a person can set their own standards and honor them through consistent action. A promise made to others may be forgotten, dismissed, or forgiven, but a promise broken with the self carries a deeper cost. It erodes inner trust, cracking the foundation of self-respect. Self-trust isn't born from cheering words or grand victories. It comes from proving to yourself, day after day, that you can keep your word. When someone says they'll write every morning at 6 and follows through, they're not just building a writing habit. They're forming a clear image of a trustworthy person. That trustworthiness is the root of character. It doesn't need recognition, only that the doer knows they kept their word. In Stoicism, personal integrity isn't an ideal. It is a duty. Epictetus warned that nothing is more dangerous than the quiet erosion of self-respect through small compromises. Every time you say, just this once, or today doesn't count, or I'll make up for it tomorrow, you unconsciously train your brain to believe your words mean little. This doesn't stay confined to a single act. It seeps into every corner of life, from work to relationships, from how you see yourself to how you meet adversity. The habit of breaking promises to yourself creates a downward spiral. You vow to do something, then don't. Guilt follows, draining motivation. You vow again, fail again. With repetition, you stop believing in your ability to change. No one needs to sabotage you from the outside. You collapse from within. And that is how those striving to rise remain stuck, not from lack of ability, but from a broken trust in their own word. In contrast, every kept promise, no matter how small, strengthens that inner trust. You say you won't eat sweets this week, and you don't. You say you'll shut your phone at 9 p.m., and you do. These small acts, are the first bricks in rebuilding the structure of trust you once let crumble. Over time, you won't need hollow self-encouragement because each fulfilled promise affirms, I am trustworthy. I am in control. A Stoic does not seek applause for private discipline. They don't post their new habits online for likes. They don't need an audience. Because discipline to them is a relationship between reason and action, between the life they aspire to and the life they live. They act with discipline not out of pressure, but because they know no one is coming to save them. To become better, they must start by honoring every promise to themselves. In today's world, where everything tempts distraction and compromise is easy, keeping promises to yourself is harder than ever. And that's why it matters more than ever. The one who can stay true to themselves in a chaotic world possesses a power few others have. They need no supervisor, no reward, no push, because the deepest fuel comes from knowing, I am living in alignment with the values I chose. A common example is building a new habit. Many fail, not because they chose poorly, but because they constantly break their initial commitment. They plan to be exercised 3 times a week, then skip the second session because something came up. They intend to meditate each morning, but sleep in and say, I'll do it tomorrow. After enough repetitions, the brain learns these promises don't matter. And from there, every personal development plan begins to unravel. By contrast, those who base discipline on promises they never break understand. Quality lies not in scale, but in consistency. A small action, repeated with sacred respect for one's own word, yields enormous returns over time. This is how Stoics build emotional stability, resilience through adversity, and the capacity to lead themselves in any situation. Discipline is not harshness, it is self-respect. When you keep promises to yourself, you are not just shaping willpower. You are learning how to love yourself deeply and responsibly. And once you have built a relationship of trust with yourself, you will no longer be easily swayed by passing moods, external noise, or others' doubts. So discipline, in its truest Stoic form, is the promise you are not allowed to break. Not because of fear of judgment, but because you know, if you let yourself down, nothing else can save you from the quiet decay within. 2. Protect your energy, safeguarding the inner fuel. In Stoic philosophy, though, managing personal relationships is not merely a social concern, it is a moral and psychological one. The Stoics, thousands of years ago, understood that the human mind is directly shaped by its environment and the people with whom it frequently interacts. Thus, choosing who is allowed to enter your inner world is not a sign of coldness or isolation, but a necessary act to protect stability, clarity, and a purpose-driven life. Seneca warned that humans are easily swayed by the emotions, values, and even thinking patterns of others. When constantly surrounded by negativity, anger, or complaint, it becomes nearly impossible to remain calm and rational. This is not just natural empathy, it is emotional contagion, well recognized in both ancient thought and modern psychology. And for the Stoic, preserving self-mastery requires the deliberate removal of relationships that hinder personal growth. A harmful connection need not be an obvious enemy or open adversary. It could be a friend who subtly seeds doubt in your abilities, a colleague who gossips, or a relative who manipulates emotions. These influences are not always immediate or loud, They erode trust, distort purpose, and slowly pull you away from the path you've chosen. The Stoic does not seek to change others, nor to argue about values. Instead, they maintain distance and return their focus to what lies within their control: thoughts, actions, and reactions. If a relationship no longer supports your pursuit of peace, wisdom, and autonomy, the right action, however emotionally difficult, is to limit or end the interaction. Cutting off a negative bond is not an act of hatred or punishment. In Stoic terms, it is self-defense, like a gatekeeper protecting a fortress from invasion. The mind, according to thinkers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, is sacred ground, defended not with weapons, but with clearly drawn personal boundaries. Many hesitate to walk away from toxic relationships out of fear of appearing cold, selfish, or due to guilt. But Stoicism teaches that reason must take precedence over emotion. If a relationship consistently disturbs your balance, weakens your core values, or pulls you back into habits you've struggled to overcome, staying in it is a betrayal of your own development. This practice of choosing who enters the mind extends beyond real-life people. It includes media, films, books, and group conversations. What you consume daily imprints itself on your psyche, directly or indirectly. A person constantly exposed to anxiety-inducing, cynical, or sarcastic content cannot easily maintain clarity or calm. Thus, the Stoic sets up a filtering system for both physical and psychological space to prevent unnecessary spiritual drain. This selectivity is not isolation. It is intentional living. The Stoic does not shun society. They carefully curate each interaction. They walk with those who are disciplined, principled, self-governed, and striving toward betterment. They understand that a strong community is the ideal environment to reinforce inner strength. Moreover, choosing the right companions amplifies positive resonance. Around those with similar ideals, right action becomes natural. The disciplined inspire through deed. The emotionally grounded create peaceful energy that steadies those near them. So the Stoic does not merely flee the negative. They seek the positive, not for dependence, but for mutual elevation. In sum, protecting your inner energy is impossible without rigorous selectivity in relationships. Every person who enters your mind brings energy, constructive or corrosive. You are the gatekeeper. The more clarity and purity you preserve within, the more easily you maintain reason, focus, and will. 3 pillars of the Stoic way. In a world increasingly loud and fast, the ability to sustain inner stillness is one of the highest expressions of wisdom and willpower in Stoic thought. Stillness is not just external silence, but inward steadiness, unmoved by the noise of society, media, negative emotion, or the distractions of a digital age. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus both emphasize that the mind deserves as much protection as the body. The body recovers with rest. The mind, when constantly disturbed, becomes disoriented, unfocused, and vulnerable to long-term decline. To preserve inner stillness, the Stoics' first step is to establish clear boundaries between the outer world and the sanctum of the soul. Setting boundaries is not rejection of society, nor a denial of the world's relevance. Rather, the Stoic knows man is part of the whole and carries duties within the community. But they also know that not every word, image, or emotion deserves entry to the mind. Boundaries exist to safeguard lucidity, the foundation for right rational, and purpose-aligned decisions. One of the greatest threats to inner stillness today is information overload. Each day, we absorb thousands of messages, opinions, images, and videos from social platforms, apps, and news feeds. Smartphones leave the mind no time to rest or reflect deeply. The result is distraction, scattered attention, and the erosion of independent thought. The Stoic meets this threat by deliberately carving daily space for silence, a return to self. This may start with simple acts: turning off the phone at a fixed hour, avoiding social media upon waking, or spending 10 to 15 minutes daily in meditation or quiet reflection. These pauses are not wasted time. They are breathing spaces where the mind reclaims balance. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Withdraw into yourself often, for nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This is not escapism. It is a reminder that within lies a space untouched by social expectations, comparisons, or fleeting moods. In returning inward, we reclaim the clarity to act rightly, rather than react impulsively. Along with time and solitude, boundary setting includes intentionality in what we receive. Not every invitation, every piece of content, or every demand for attention deserves a response. The Stoic asks, does this make me stronger? Does this nourish my mind? Does this move me closer to the values I uphold? These questions filter the influx and block what would drain or scatter mental energy. Boundary setting also includes regulating emotional reactions to the world. In an age inflamed by fake news, political outrage, public shaming, and constant comparison, the ability to stay calm and not react instantly is a deep form of inner stillness. The Stoic recognizes not every event requires reaction, not every word needs a reply, and not every injustice demands an immediate outcry. Choosing your response is an act of control, and that control is rooted in inner calm. In an era where globalizations and technology touch every moment of life, stillness is no longer natural, it is a discipline. And like all Stoic disciplines, inner stillness is honed through repetition, clarity, and returning to reason's center. The Stoic doesn't expect to silence all noise, but learns to dwell in peace within the noise. That is the highest art. In conclusion, maintaining inner stillness in a chaotic world is the work of boundary making, not for isolation, but for protection. The Stoic understands that the mind cannot flourish if it is constantly pulled, distracted, or governed by impulse. Only when placed in a space with healthy limits can focus, reason, and inner wisdom arise and guide us toward a life of integrity, stability, and strength in adversity. 3. Refocus, shattering the noise, reclaiming purpose. In Stoic thought, mastering the mind is both the first step and the most essential one in living a life of reason and self-command. One may train the body, accumulate knowledge, or uphold moral values, but without control over one's focus and attention, those efforts lack stability. A scattered mind is a vulnerable mind, easily swayed by external forces and adrift in its actions. In the modern world, distraction is no longer a rare condition. It is the norm. Smartphones, social media, non-stop emails, minute-by-minute updates, intrusive ads, all create an environment where human attention becomes a contested resource. As a result, people increasingly struggle to concentrate on a single task. Jumping thoughts, habitual multitasking, and the compulsion to stay constantly informed leave the mind fatigued, shallow, and unstable. From a Stoic perspective, such distraction signals a loss of self-governance. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that a person can maintain peace if they preserve their power to choose their response and refuse to let the world dictate their mind. Yet when the mind is continually drawn toward trivialities, pointless debates, social comparisons, fleeting concerns, this power is nullified. One no longer lives by reason, but reacts to external stimuli, losing sight of what truly matters and what is mere noise. Eliminating distraction, then, becomes the first act in reclaiming control over the mind. This doesn't require drastic or sudden changes, but begins with small, practical steps, limiting social media time, silencing phone notifications, designating periods without new information, or creating deep work sessions. These modest acts, performed deliberately and consistently, restore focus and return the mind to equilibrium. A central Stoic principle is to distinguish what is within our control from what is not. What others say, what news spreads, what happens in the world, these are largely beyond our command. But how much time one spends consuming this information, reacting to it, or getting pulled into it is entirely a matter of conscious choice. Eliminating distraction is not indifference or denial. It is selection, a deliberate act to protect the capacity to focus on what holds real meaning. Once the mind is freed from constant fragmentation, transformation becomes perceptible. One begins to think more deeply, make clearer decisions, and act with greater consistency. No longer yanked by every headline, petty emotion, or stray comment, a person can stay oriented, cultivating autonomy and a sense of authorship over life. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by events, but by their judgments of those events. Yet when the mind is fragmented, even right thinking becomes difficult. A person simultaneously scrolling news, replying to messages, and managing tasks cannot think clearly about what is right, what is wrong, what demands immediate action, and what should be ignored. Clear judgment emerges only in a quiet, undistracted mind, and that is precisely the aim of removing distraction. In daily practice, Stoics reserve time for solitude and personal reflection. This is when the mind steps away from external stimulation and turns inward to assess what's been done, what needs correction, and what has veered from one's path. That quiet space is not a retreat from the world, but the foundation for inner strength, where distraction holds no sway. In sum, eliminating distraction is not a convenience. It is a necessity for those seeking to live by reason and core values. In Stoicism, focus is a mark of strength, and to preserve that strength, we must actively cleanse the mental environment, curating information, managing devices, and cultivating intentional habits of response. When distraction fades, control returns, and with it, the ability to act deliberately, wisely, and with unshakable purpose. In Stoicism, focus is not a fleeting state, but the result of intentional choice. The Stoic does not act randomly or by instinct, but aligns every thought, decision, and behavior toward a central goal. That goal need not always be a concrete achievement. It may be a moral ideal, a chosen virtue, or an inner orientation held with clarity. Choosing a single aim is not just strategic. It simplifies life, protects the mind from dispersion, and builds unshakable resolve. This contrasts sharply with the modern lifestyle, where people chase multiple goals at once: career growth, social networking, health, financial gain, self-development, and more. The Stoic models a life of deep consistency. When the mind is split across too many directions, no single one is strong enough to transform the person. Multiplicity of aims weakens effectiveness, breeds vagueness, saps motivation, and leads to quitting in the face of difficulty. Epictetus said, "You cannot improve if you're pulled in too many directions." This is rooted in a core Stoic principle that true freedom arises when one controls the mind and its direction. And such control emerges only when energy, time, and will are focused on one clear, enduring purpose. A single goal does not limit growth. It gives every action meaning, every choice a clear standard, and every day significance. Choosing one purpose doesn't mean abandoning everything else. It means naming a center that guides all other priorities. For example, if one chooses integrity as their core aim, then all career decisions, relationships, and behaviors are measured against it. Faced with a choice between easy gain and right action, the priority is clear. In moments of temptation or confusion, they possess an inner compass. In practice, this singular goal often aligns with the Stoic concept of living according to nature, that is, living in accord with reason, with the highest human faculties, and with the order of the universe. Far from being abstract, this has tangible application. By anchoring to a consistent standard, the Stoic minimizes inner conflict, avoids hesitation, and guards against value clashes, all of which drain energy and derail growth. To direct all will toward that goal is the next step, one that demands steady practice and a disciplined effort. The Stoic does not act on mood or impulse, but on whether an action fits the chosen aim. When facing a decision, they don't ask, "Do I feel like this?" They ask, "Does this move me closer to my goal?" That question becomes a filter, removing the superfluous, resisting distraction, and preserving strength against external pull. A vital outcome of living with one aim is resilience in adversity. When trials arise, instead of becoming lost or discouraged, the purposeful person sees challenge as part of the path. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle on the path becomes the path." With a reasoned goal, nourished by unwavering will, every hardship becomes an opportunity for growth and inner refinement. Living with one aim also clarifies the value of time, a resource that cannot be replenished. The one who knows their path naturally becomes more selective in the people they engage with, the content they absorb, the projects they pursue. Every small decision feeds into a larger strategy, forging a bond between daily action and lifelong principle. Ultimately, in Stoicism, selecting one goal and channeling full will into it is not self-limiting, it is self-liberating. It narrows the field to deepen the quality of life, clarifies the value of action, and sustains mental stability in a volatile world. When every choice is shaped by a single core aim, we not only move faster, we move true, toward autonomy, clarity, and a life of meaning in the Stoic sense. 4. Restart. Begin again, as someone new. In Stoic philosophy, a foundational principle for any deep transformation is to accept reality as it is. Rebirth cannot occur in a mind that still denies the present, justifies its failures, or blames external conditions. Stoicism holds that before one can rebuild a new life, one must first reconcile with the truth, unembellished, unfiltered, and unescaped. Only when reality is faced with reason, stripped of complaint or melodrama, can a true beginning unfold. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time debating what a good man should be one." This reflects the Stoic rule of acting rather than assigning blame. Blaming, whether circumstance, others, or fate, may briefly soothe the ego by casting oneself as a victim, but it also strips away one's power to change. The Stoic refuses to play the victim. Though they acknowledge external forces may affect life, they return to the essential question: what can I do with what I have? Epictetus drew a clear line between what is within our control and what is not. The past, others' behavior, the weather, the economy, all lie beyond our reach. But our responses, choices, thoughts, and actions, these are ours to govern. When someone falters, makes mistakes, or feels lost, the first step to recovery is not to search outside, but to turn inward, to recognize that initiative begins within. Rebirth demands that the mind be freed from emotional burdens like resentment, regret, or shame. These feelings, though seemingly justified, anchor a person to the past. The Stoic does not suppress emotion, but does not let emotion dictate action. Emotions are data, not commands. And when facing an unwelcome truth, a failure, a wound, a crisis, they do not collapse into self-pity, but seek to treat it as a lesson. The question is not, "Why did this happen to me?" but, "What will I do with this?" Acceptance in Stoicism is not passive surrender. It is not bowing to fate or yielding to helplessness. On the contrary, it is the active dismantling of illusion, laying bare the truth as the only reliable ground from which to act. Those who do not accept reality often dwell in fantasy, delay real action, or avoid necessary change. For the Stoic, acceptance is preparation, an interior clearing, a zooming out, a renewed entry point grounded in clarity. Justifications is a common human strategy for evading responsibility. When things go wrong, excuses abound. I didn't have the resources. I came from the wrong background. No one helped me. I wasn't lucky. While these may hold fragments of truth, Stoicism teaches that what matters is not the cause, but the response. You cannot choose where you were born, but you can choose how to live. You cannot change the past, but you can control your actions today. The ability to start again, in Stoic terms, does not come from erasing the past. It comes from severing emotional attachment to it, recognizing I failed, but I am not defined by failure is a breakthrough. From this clarity, one can build again, not on illusion, not on excuses, but on what is still within reach. In practice, Stoic rebirth is quiet. No trumpets, no dramatic turning points. It happens in small choices made each day, saying no to delay, refusing to assign blame, rewriting a goal instead of complaining. Each act quietly declares, I no longer live by the old ways. Repeated, these small decisions form a new pattern, solid, lucid, and untethered from circumstance. In Stoic spirit, rebirth begins with meeting reality through reason, rejecting blame and excuse, and focusing solely on what can be controlled. Only through mastering this awareness can one rebuild life, firmly, patiently, and on course. Every restart begins not from the world outside, but from an inner decision, not to retreat from reality, but to act from within it. For the Stoic, internal change and life reconstruction are never the result of a burst of inspiration or a single dramatic choice. True transformation begins in small acts, repeated steadily, regardless of mood or setting. Stoicism regards concrete behavior, not lofty ideals, as the foundation of a reasoned, directed, and enduring life. Epictetus insisted that philosophy is not found in words, but in deeds. Don't tell me what you've read. Show me how you live. This encapsulates Stoicism's essence. Change lies not in thinking about change, but in deliberate action. Every right act, however small, matters because it strengthens habit, shapes character, and stores inner power. Restarting one's life often comes with pressure to succeed quickly, change completely, produce instant results. But to the Stoic, rebirth needs no spectacle. It starts with the smallest tasks: waking up on time, writing a few lines of reflection at night, resisting a bad habit, staying silent instead of arguing, or simply finishing what was promised, unseen, unrecognized. Though such acts yield no immediate outcome, they play a vital role in rebuilding will. When one repeats a small behavior daily, the mind begins to recognize it as the new standard. That repetition becomes an anchor, a steady point around which the old self fades and a new self takes shape. Disciplined, accountable, inwardly directed. In his journals, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to perform his duties even when uninspired. He wrote, "Were you made to lie under warm blankets? Or were you made to act like a man?" This is not self-criticism, it is a standard reset. Right action in Stoicism must proceed even when inspiration fails, because inspiration is fleeting. Discipline builds lasting rebirth. A common error in the path of change is overestimating the value of grand breakthroughs and underestimating small, consistent actions. But in truth, only the latter can yield lasting transformation. Lofty goals without behavioral foundation lead to disillusionment and abandonment. The Stoic knows, if one does just one right thing daily, consistently, rationally, without excuse, change will come in the deepest and most sustainable way. Small acts are also where self-honesty is forged. In today's world, where external recognition is craved, the unnoticed action is the true test of autonomy. The Stoic values quiet deeds, not shared online, not praised, because they signify harmony between word, thought, and action. A person who journals nightly does not seek admiration, but sharpens their awareness and self-integrity. Repetition of small acts also strengthens resistance to temptation. When one practices rejecting procrastination, calming anger, or cutting off negative thought spirals, they slowly install a reflex system grounded in reason over impulse. The ability to say no to what undermines their values becomes second nature, a form of wisdom that operates silently beneath daily behavior. Rebirth in Stoicism is not a sudden metamorphosis. It is a slow, steady crossing from the old to the new. The practitioner expects no rescue, waits for no perfect moment, but repeats right action step by step until a new self takes form. Looking back, it is these humble, repeated efforts that become the firm foundation for a new life, strong, principled, and no longer ruled by fleeting emotion or illusion. In essence, small acts, in the Stoic tradition, are the indispensable tools of self-reconstruction. No grand declarations, no lofty promises, just a string of deliberate, reasoned, consistent actions. Each act reshapes identity. And this sequence, sustained over time, brings true rebirth, not loud, but unshakable. 5. Reset. Erase what no longer serves you. In Stoic philosophy, the first step in rebuilding a rational life is freeing the mind from the burdens of the past. Mistakes, failures, wounds, and former relationships should not be treated as permanent weights, but redefined as things beyond our control. The Stoic does not deny the value of memory, but refuses to let the past dictate the present. In this way of life, the past is not a place to dwell, only a place to learn from and move on. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The past is gone, the future hasn't arrived. The only thing you hold is the present moment." This is not just philosophical, it's a principle of action. Every effort to improve life must begin with what is, and to be fully engaged with the present, we must sever unnecessary ties to what's behind us. The past, whether good or bad, cannot be changed. Therefore, the mental energy spent dwelling on it must be redirected toward present action. The burden of the past often lies not in events alone, but in unresolved emotions, regret, shame, resentment, or betrayal. These emotions, if suppressed or constantly replayed, can crystallize into negative self-beliefs. Someone who has failed repeatedly may come to believe they're not good enough. Someone who's been rejected may believe they're unworthy. Left unchecked, these beliefs silently shape behavior, leading to hesitation, insecurity, or self-imposed limits. Stoicism teaches us to confront emotions tied to the past with reason, not submission. Analyzing past events through an objective lens, separating fact from emotion, is a vital practice. A failure doesn't make someone worthless. A wound doesn't define one's entire worth. Looking back to learn, not to self-punish, allows negative experiences to become deep sources of wisdom. Letting go of the past in Stoicism does not mean erasing or denying it. It means repositioning it. The Stoic doesn't try to delete what happened, but assigns it its rightful place as something no longer obstructing present action. A financial mistake becomes a lesson in stewardship, not a life sentence of incompetence. A failed relationship proves a wrong choice, not a verdict on one's lovability. Epictetus taught that it is not events that harm us, but how we interpret them. When we repeatedly interpret the past negatively, we recreate the pain and keep it alive in our minds, even when the world has moved on. Letting go is therefore not emotional alone. It is a rational act, choosing a more useful narrative and refusing to imprison ourselves in obsolete views. A key step in this process is realizing that the past holds no power unless we give it power. What happened cannot be changed, but how we respond now is entirely within our control. The Stoic sees the power to choose a response as the highest form of freedom. So when we stop repeating old stories and disassociate from harmful identities, we declare, "I am no longer ruled by what is past." One method practiced by many Stoics is rewriting personal history through a new lens. Instead of recounting the past as a series of failures or wounds, they frame it as a sequence of events that led to growth, awakening, or strength. Reframing the past shifts the emotions attached to it, liberates trapped energy, and makes room for what's next. Ultimately, freeing oneself from the weight of the past is a prerequisite for deliberate self-renewal. One cannot move forward while constantly looking back. One cannot begin anew while carrying a bag full of blame, regret, and self-condemnation. In Stoic thought, inner freedom, the source of lasting change, arises only when one chooses to live fully in the present, unshackled by what no longer belongs to the future. In short, freeing oneself from the past is not an emotion, it's a rational act. It means treating the past as information, not a sentence. The Stoic does not flee from memory, but lives to act. An action can only be whole when the mind is no longer weighed down by what no longer serves growth. A new beginning doesn't start when circumstances change, but when the inner chains of the past are broken. In Stoicism, to reset and renew life fundamentally, one must not only release the past, but actively sever self-destructive habits and thought patterns that silently erode inner strength. Repeated behaviors that serve no growth, limiting beliefs that inhibit action, and defensive responses that no longer serve, all are forms of slow self-sabotage. Stoicism teaches that humans are not born to live by reflex, but by reason. Yet much of our behavior is shaped by unexamined habits, gathered unconsciously over time, from environment, circumstances, or unresolved emotions. Left unchecked, these habits become quiet systems of self-destruction, procrastination, complaint, overcaution, or dependence on external approval. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have the power to stop whenever you choose. No one binds you but yourself." This reveals a core Stoic truth. Inner freedom begins by identifying and dismantling the internal mechanisms that harm us, even if they feel familiar. A person who stays trapped in harmful patterns is not without options. They simply haven't summoned enough reason to examine and change them. Self-destructive habits don't always appear extreme. Often they wear subtle disguises, cloaked in justification, staying up late with the excuse of needing me time, overeating under stress, or delaying tasks because I want to do it when I feel right. Repeated enough, these rationalizations become beliefs that quietly derail our course. Self-destructive thinking also lives in internal language, the way we talk to ourselves. Phrases like, "I'm not good enough," "I always fail," or "I'll never change," reflect a deeply ingrained belief system. Epictetus warned that thoughts, repeated often enough, become beliefs, even without reason. Thus, breaking destructive thought is not just behavioral, it's cognitive restructuring through observation and rational dialogue with the self. Stoicism does not tell us to suppress negative emotion, nor does it ask us to identify with it. The Stoic learns to detach from mental states that don't serve their values. When a thought or reaction leads to fatigue, inertia, or prolonged frustration, it is not seen as fixed, it's recognized as a habit that can be replaced. Breaking self-destructive patterns requires active, repeated choice, because old habits tend to return when vigilance drops or emotions surge. So, a key part of resetting the self is creating replacements, actions that serve us better. If one's past response to stress was avoidance, the alternative might be writing down causes and solutions. If it was anger, the alternative might be pausing and responding later. Repeated often enough, these new choices become habit, slowly eroding the old ones. Stoicism emphasizes continuous practice. One moment of restraint doesn't make one calm, but it's the first step. Every time you avoid slipping into an old loop, you reinforce autonomy. And this chain of small actions, maintained over time, forms a stronger behavioral structure. From there, personal identity begins to shift toward strength, toward clarity, toward reason. In conclusion, Stoic philosophy sees cutting off destructive habits and thinking not as abstract theory, but as disciplined, rational practice. It begins with recognition, observing oneself without judgment, but with honesty. Then comes action, deliberately stepping away from behaviors, thoughts, and reactions that no longer serve. When no longer ruled by unconscious patterns, we reclaim the space to reset ourselves on a foundation of self-command, wisdom, and purposeful action. The essence of a life lived by Stoic principle. It wasn't by accident that I chose Stoic philosophy as the foundation to reset my life. There was a time when I felt completely lost, not from lack of opportunity, but because inside me was chaos. The burden of the past, scattered focus, looping self-reproach, and the helplessness of breaking promises to myself. At that moment, what I needed wasn't more inspiration, but a system, clear, disciplined, and applicable every single day. And I found that in Stoicism. I started with something very small, waking up 30 minutes earlier. Not to do anything grand, just to sit in stillness, write down my thoughts, and name what was controlling my mind that day. Those mornings became a refuge, a place where I rebuilt my ability to focus and choose. I turned off all phone notifications after 9 p.m. Simple, but enough to quiet the noise. I cut ties with people who drained my energy, and I didn't apologize for it. Once the silence settled, I chose a single goal, clear and unwavering, and directed all my time and actions toward it. Change didn't come quickly, but each small act, upheld with integrity, helped me reconstruct a new identity. I didn't need to shout that I was living differently. I only had to look at my daily actions and see that they were no longer what they used to be. If this video awakened something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next content. Every subscription is a quiet commitment that you are choosing to live more consciously and with greater self-mastery. And always remember, greatness isn't found in where you begin, but in how you rebuild yourself, quietly, relentlessly, and without compromise. See you in the next video.